you have any more questions about things, I will just turn it over to you if you want to share your screen to talk about effects of early experience on resiliency in puppies.
All right. That's not what we want. Yeah.
Oh, that looks better.
That looks better, right?
Oh, those are peer sheps. That one's mother is on. Both, I think, there.
Yes. And you'll notice the puppy in my videos, he kind of matches because he's a merle. So he's a bi-merle, so he fits in with the color scheme. I wanted to just give a little bit of an introduction about myself before I get rolling into this. Just so everybody knows, this is the first time this content has been presented, so we'll see how it goes. I have been working with dogs for just about 20 years now, and I specialize in behavior problems such as fear, anxiety, and aggression. I have been published multiple times in industry journals and books. I speak all over North America. I've spoken at conferences, and I teach online and in-person webinars and courses and things like that. I am very passionate as well about puppy training because effective puppy raising and training is one way that we can actually, probably one of the most effective ways that we can prevent dogs from having behavior problems later in life. So getting a good start on that when they are young and making sure that they're raised well makes a huge difference. So we're going to talk today about the effects of early exposure on resilience in puppies. So the first thing that we wanted to talk about is actually what is resilience and how does that work when and factor in when we're talking about dog training and behavior. So the definition of resilience, an easy one that I found, was the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. So how that relates to dogs and dog behavior is if you have a dog who encounters something stressful or that is going to induce fear, they're able to bounce back quickly from that to normal. So a fearful dog, if they encounter something that makes them feel nervous, they could have a very hard time getting back to normal, back to baseline. When we say that a dog has good resilience, it means when they encounter stress, they bounce back to normal quite quickly. And why that's important with dogs is dogs live in our world, and there are a lot of things that are unnatural and not normal for dogs that they're going to encounter. Even with puppies, there's no way to socialize them to everything that exists in the environment. So if we can raise a dog and breed a dog in a way that if they encounter something novel that's stressful for them, they can, one, cope with it, and two, they don't have long-lasting stress responses to that. It makes their life a lot better, and it makes them better companion animals. So first I wanted to touch on a little bit about what breeders can do, because a lot of this starts actually even before the puppies are born. I'm not going to go into this in a lot of detail because I'm not a breeder. It's not my specialty, but it is important to understand what experiences can affect your puppy before you even bring them home. And this can also apply to if you are adopting a dog. So if you have a dog that's a puppy in rescue, these are things that, that rescues can do as well with their litters. So one of the things that is fairly well studied is the effect that stress of the mother can have on the puppies. I don't have the actual sources, but there's a couple really interesting studies that have been done. One of them was actually taking puppies that were raised with a stressed out mother and then transferring them to a calm mother. And I believe that the puppies that when they switched to the calm mother actually showed better calm behavior, and the puppies that stayed with the stressful mom grew up more stressful. So the actual dam's behavior while she's raising the puppies can have an effect on their temperament. And if the mother is stressed while the puppies are still in utero, it actually affects their ability to tolerate stress when they're older. So they actually have a lower stress tolerance and they can become less resilient to stress. So that's just from the mother being stressed out when she's pregnant, before she's even had the puppies, if she's sick, if she's stressed, that can actually transfer to the puppies and how they process stress and trauma as adults. So it's really important if you are somebody who is breeding dogs or somebody who is raising dogs in a rescue, that we try to have the mother have good care, good health, good nutrition, and that her environment is as low stress for her as possible, because it actually affects the puppies for the duration of their lives. It affects the way that their brains process things. So there is something that is known as early neurological stimulation. I'm not certain if there is research on this. If there is, perhaps Patricia can post some sources. This is something that some breeders will do, which is a system to sort of expose puppies to different stimuli when they're very, very young. And the theory behind this is that by doing so, it sort of inoculates the puppies very, very early to stress on the neural system. I also have friends who are fabulous breeders who have said to me that they don't do a strict ENS program, but they just do regular handling of the puppies. The puppies are raised in-house, they're raised around regular activity, they get handled every day, and the puppies have good genetic backgrounds, so they find they don't need to do this strict system. But if you are maybe a newer breeder or less experienced, or your household isn't as stimulating, for whatever reason you can't handle the puppies daily, or your puppies are rescue dogs, or for whatever reason they don't have as good of a genetic background, they recommended that doing the ENS would probably be beneficial. I do know that there are some people who really swear by this, and again, on the flip side, I have friends who say, no, we just handle them every day and we turn them over and we tickle their feet and we just handle them normally. But there is actually a set protocol that a lot of people use that they swear by, that they say the theory is that this can actually help puppies be able to tolerate stress better as adults. So the other thing that breeders can do, this can actually start before the puppy even comes home. So generally under 7 to 9 weeks of age, they can start to expose the puppies to novel objects, sounds, and surfaces. So this is something that puppy owners should be doing as well. We're going to cover that in a little bit more detail, but breeders can actually start doing this before the puppy even comes home. And that's going to help the dog as it grows and matures to be able to handle new sights, sounds, and experiences better. And breeders can also start early training with puppies. Puppies can actually start training as soon as they will eat. They can start doing basic classical conditioning, and they can also start learning behaviors before they go home. This is going to help with building confidence. It helps with understanding of the world, and it also helps them to create a bond with people. And with dogs, the earlier that we start to teach them how to learn, the easier it is to train them. And that can actually start as young as a couple of weeks old. The other thing, or the last thing I think that breeders can start to work on, is helping the puppy understand acclimation to confinement. So I don't know if every breeder does this, but I personally have experienced a breeder that starts a puppy on understanding that the crate is a comfortable place is very helpful. It makes crate training them at home much easier. They'll probably won't, be doing a full crate training program, but even just getting the pups used to resting in the crate together and then separate while you are around and present makes a big difference. The other thing the other thing that's really helpful is when the puppies are actually separated from the dam. Generally, you're going to see anywhere between 7 and 10 weeks. My Belgian sheepdog, when I brought him home, the breeder actually recommended earlier, 7 weeks, because she has found that they bond better to their humans and transfer to a new environment earlier at that age with her lines. My Australian Shepherd, I brought him home at 10 weeks. Just so he could have a little bit more time with mom and litter mates. But generally, you're going to see somewhere between 7 to 9 weeks is most common. There is generally a sensitive period that puppies will go through at that time. So it can be a little bit tricky of when time to let them go home. You don't want them to stay with the litter too long because they start to get over bonded and start scrapping with their litter mates, but too young, they actually can have a lot of issues with impulsivity. They tend to be extra mouthy or bitey. So you really don't want to have the puppies separated any younger than 7 weeks old, and you generally want them to be going to their new homes, I would say, by 10 weeks. I know some breeders I've heard of keeping up to 12, but I think the average is going to be probably around 8 weeks. So the section we're going to spend the most time on is what can you as puppy owners do, because that is what most of us have the most control over when we are adopting or purchasing a puppy. And the cool thing is, if you work with a really good breeder who has good bloodlines, the dogs have good stable genetics, and they do a lot of this early program, it makes it much easier for you when you bring your puppy home. You can get away with doing a lot less exposure and socializing, and your dog will still grow up to be stable. However, if you have a dog who doesn't have as good genetics, maybe doesn't have a good early upbringing, you're going to want to do a lot of this type of stuff, a lot of socializing, to try to counteract some of the negative effects that can have. And with those types of dogs, even if you do a lot of exposure, a lot of early training, they can still develop issues. So it really is nice to get a dog who's been raised well, has solid genetics, and a breeder who's done everything right from the start. It makes a huge difference, not only in how easy it is to train your puppy, but how stable and how good their temperament is when they're adults. I did want to talk briefly about how I would define socialization, because I'm going to use that term quite a bit. And if you're not a professional dog trainer or a breeder, it might not be something that is familiar to you. A lot of people think that socialization refers to just having your dog play with other puppies. Socialization is actually the process of exposing your dog to the world that we live in. And with young puppies, you actually really only have until about 16 weeks to accomplish this. With some breeds, I feel you have to get it done even sooner. I think certain breeds, particularly I've seen this in German Shepherds, I think they close off to new experiences earlier. So the earlier that you start this, the better. So socialization is the process of exposing your dog to the environment that we live in and exposing them to novelty. So when we talk about exposing them to novelty, that means just sort of new weird things. And that way your puppy understands, hey, if I encounter something strange in the world, I don't have to worry about it. And that's where we come in for like building the resilient dog that I was talking about. If something scares them, they can bounce back quickly. They also have trust with their owner, so they know that they can look to them for guidance. But socialization is not just playing with other dogs. That is definitely part of it, building dog social skills, but we also want to expose our puppy to the environment. So sounds in the environment, sights in the environment, different surfaces under their feet, things that make noise, things that move, as well as when we talk about people, we want our dogs to understand that people sound weird sometimes. They sound different. So kids or loud people can move different. You know, people that might be in a wheelchair or a walker or walk with a limp, and they can look different as well. So people with beards, sunglasses, hats, those are all things that we want to try really hard to expose puppies to when they're younger. And if you can get that done and get a lot of exposure to different people and different environments, often you will end up with a puppy who can handle a lot of different things. So we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail and break some things down. I have a couple video examples. I didn't put too many in because I didn't want to take up too much time. There's literally so much I could show you on this, and I will talk a little bit on each section about some of the other activities that I do, but I do have a couple of videos. So the first thing, which I did touch on, is just exposing your dog to novelty. So when we talk about novelty, it's new objects, new sounds, different surfaces. So when we talk about surfaces, it's actually under the dog's feet, different places and situations. I have a couple of videos to show you, but I would like to talk a little bit about some of the things that I might throw in my puppy classes or if I am socializing a puppy. When I'm talking about novel objects, it can be anything that moves, anything that makes noise. Generally want to try to get them used to things that they are going to see in their everyday environment, as well as things that are just new and different. So I will do a lot of, here's a cardboard box, let's check it out, let's put your nose in, let's climb in it. You know, here's a bottle full of beans or coins, you want to roll it around. You'll see me working with an umbrella, which is really good. A tambourine, just new things, it makes noise, it moves different. We do wobble board in puppy class. I have a big inflatable ball that they climb on and push around. So just anything that is different looking, sounds different, it might smell different, it might move different. Sounds, definitely sounds around the house, like a blow dryer, vacuum cleaner, washer, dryer, banging a pot, anything that they're going to hear on a regular basis, especially that's loud, weird, or startling. Traffic, children, people yelling, thunder, gunshots, all of that good stuff that typically scares dogs. Surfaces, stairs, concrete, grass, grates, really anything just different under their feet. Places, just taking your puppy to the park. I like to take them and hang outside the grocery store quite a bit because there's a lot going on and you see a lot of different people, and just new situations. So just taking them out so that they understand that there's a world that exists beyond their backyard. One thing to bear in mind that I think is important to bring up is it is very safe to do this with a puppy that has not had their full round of shots. So you don't want to wait until they've got their full round of vaccines, because by the time they've got the full round of vaccines, they're 16 weeks old. And remember, we only have until maximum 16 weeks old to do the socialization. So what I usually recommend to people, I go by the American Society of Veterinary Behaviorist guidelines. For our puppy classes, we bleach everything before they come in, and they have to have first set of shots at least a week before the session and a clean fecal sample. And that is safe, one set of shots. They can come in a sterilized environment, but I would still encourage people to bring their puppies out carrying them or in a bag so they can still see things and hear things. Once you get that second set of shots, it's pretty safe to bring your puppy out walking most places in public. Just avoid high traffic areas that there could be a lot of unknown dogs, because the risk is disease transmission, typically parvovirus, which is transmitted through feces. So no dog parks, no busy trails, things like that, but taking them out around the house to the grocery store and all that after second set of shots is very, very safe. So let's look at a couple of videos. Hopefully the sound is going to come through. Patricia, can you just give me a thumbs up if you're hearing the audio? And if not, I will talk over it. Otherwise, I'll play it twice and talk over it the second time. So this is Beecher. Beecher is, I think, he's 9 weeks old, Australian Shepherd at this time. And what we're going to be working on here is just, this is a box that has some crinkly paper inside. So it's a new object, and I want him to interact with it, and it's also going to make noise and move. Okay, I'm gonna play that again, and this time I'm gonna talk over it about what's happening. So it seems like a very simple exercise, and he actually did really well with a lot of the object socialization that I did with him. The next sample you're gonna see he actually struggled with a little bit, so it's nice because you get to see me work him through being afraid of something. Most of this stuff, he was just like, okay, whatever, it makes noise, I can step on it, it moves, no big deal. So the point of this is, hey, there's just something new and different, let's investigate it. You're gonna step in here, it's gonna make noise. Here's a whole bunch of treats, it's gonna be a positive experience for you. We wanna make sure that we go at the puppy's pace. We don't really wanna force them into doing things. I'm kind of encouraging him and prompting him with treats, but I would never put him on a leash and drag him over or pick him up and put him in it. I want him to be sort of in control of this, and that gives me a good barometer of emotionally how he's dealing with things. The whole point of these exercises is that your puppy is learning that this is a neutral to positive experience. We don't want them learning that this is scary and bad things are going to happen and my person is just going to force me through something that's scary, because then you're going to end up with the opposite of what we want, which is a dog who is more fearful and doesn't trust you. So we want to let them work through things at their own pace, lots of treats, lots of praise, so that it becomes something that is fun for them, positive, and not a scary experience. Like obviously he's not very worried about this at all. So this one is a little bit longer. I'm gonna play it through for you. If I have anything to add, I'll probably just say it so we don't have to watch it twice. This is with the umbrella. So what you'll see with this is at the beginning, he's pretty neutral about it. He's like, okay, whatever. Once I start opening it a little bit faster so that it makes a sound, he starts to get more nervous of it. And what I noticed when I was working with him is he was getting more and more avoidant of it. So I stopped and backed it up a little bit so we could finish on a high note. This is really important when we're talking about building resiliency in dogs. When we want to build resiliency, what we're effectively trying to do is build a stress tolerance. So we want to inoculate them to a low level of stress by helping them work through it. So it's really important that they don't get stressed out or scared of something and stay in that mode. If your puppy gets nervous, you really want to help them work through that and get back to normal. So you'll see me do that in this video. So first I'm just starting with the umbrella neutral. We're going to open it slowly here. No big deal. We'll have him come and check it out. I'm gonna move it around, not a big deal at all. He's not worried about that. He will take treats out of it. He will step at it, fine, no problem. And then I'm going to actually hold it over my head a little bit to sort of get him used to the picture, that visual of a person with an umbrella, because that's something that can freak a lot of dogs out. Again, he's not worried about this whatsoever. He is not nervous. If you look at his little tail, it's raised, it's relaxed. He's willingly approaching me, versus once he gets nervous, you'll see his tail goes down and he starts to move away. So he's there, he got a little startled. So that's a startle response, but his recovery was pretty good. So he went, whoa, what was that? But then he relaxed pretty quickly and was able to come over and eat treats. What you're gonna see is this gets worse over a couple of repetitions. So again, not bad. Bigger startle, he moved further away. Now he's more hesitant to come back. So we're seeing a slower recovery. At that point, I went, okay, he's actually sensitizing to this stimulus. See how he's continuing to move away, whereas previously the umbrella on the ground was no big deal. So we're going to make it easier. We're going to work him through this a little bit. Major avoidance of the umbrella now, right? So he's telling me he's afraid because his tail's gone down. He's moving away. I'm going to try to encourage him to go up, but I'm not going to force him. He says, no way. Are you crazy? That thing could kill us. He says, all right, that one's close enough. I could eat that treat. Good job. You're great. Then he has to move away again. So his flight zone around that umbrella is remaining fairly large. Now he doesn't move away that time, so that's good. I'm like, hey, you want to see if you can go a little closer? Awesome. See, his tail is a little bit more normal. He's still not super comfortable around it. So this is a good example of something that would actually build resilience in a dog. So he was startled, he was afraid of the object. We broke it down, ended on a positive note. In a subsequent session, I would probably go back and work on the umbrella opening again. But because he was actually sensitizing to that stimulus, meaning he was getting more nervous of it during the session, I wanted to stop and break it down. And again, we want to get that dog back to baseline so that they're feeling good about it before we end the session. So another thing that you can work on with your puppy, whether or not you intend to use a crate long-term, is teaching them to accept confinement. The reason that I stress this with puppies is because it is something that, again, even if you don't plan to use a crate in your home, it is something that they are going to have to encounter at some point in their life. Whether they are going to the groomer or the vet, or you take them to doggy daycare, or they're boarding, they are going to have to be comfortable with being confined. It's also a very good way to work on working your puppy through soothing themselves through low levels of stress. And that is what we're going to use to build resilience. So again, resilience is almost like vaccinating the dog against stressful events. So they learn when they're young that they can tolerate small amounts of stress and self-soothe. And crate training done well as I'm going to show you guys tether training done well is a really good way to do this. I do want to stress a couple of things. You're not seeing my entire crate training protocol. When I work with puppies in crates, I start with really simple things like just hang out in the crate with the door open. I'm going to sit right here and you're going to get a yummy chew. You're going to eat your meals in there. I make sure they're quite comfortable with that before I even start introducing the closed door. And what you're going to see in the video is actually the last step of my crate training, where I'm actually going to start introducing moving away from the dog in the crate, which is what is usually going to cause frustration, but I do take it quite slowly and there's several steps. So when I'm working with dogs and puppies, the goal is always to minimize the stress, minimize the frustration to the dog, but we do want to have some mild stress and frustration so that the dog learns that they can tolerate that and recover from it. So I'm going to show you two techniques that I will use to help the dog learn to understand the stress and frustration of confinement. One of them is going to be the last stage of crate training. The other one is something called tether training, which is a little bit easier on the dog to acclimate to, where you simply use a leash to clip the dog up to something and their movement is restricted. So this can be quite frustrating. And you'll see in the video that I actually reward the dog for any calm behavior. So they learn again that I am a little bit stressed, I'm a little bit frustrated, but I can relax, and that feels good and has good outcomes for me. So we're going to look at crate training here. Don't mind my messy house. I was puppy sitting and have way too many pets of my own. What I'm looking for here is he was really crying when I would leave the room. So I'm breaking it down a little bit. So I'm starting with one step back, return and treat, and building it up. If he does start to cry, I'm waiting until he settles before I come back to him. So that's what's kind of important here, and it's good to understand that he's not panicking. If he were panicking, I would abort this session and back up several steps in the training plan. He's just protesting a little bit. He's a little bit upset. So I'm not worried about that, and I'm going to actually let him work through it because that is going to build stress tolerance and resiliency. That's Dexter.
That was a sad sound.
You see, he cried a little bit. I waited until he relaxed, and then I went back and rewarded him.
Good boy.
Generally, when you're working with a dog on anything, you want to have them be about 80% successful. That's a good rule of thumb that you're hovering at a good level. We always want them to be more successful than wrong. My bulge is like, I'm out of here. So I'm going to wait for him to calm down.
Good boy.
And then once he does, I go back to him. So he's learning when I cry, nothing happens. As soon as I come down, she comes back to me and I get a treat. So he's getting 2 rewards there, actually. And if he were crying every time, I would be reducing my criteria, but only twice out of 5 or 6 reps he's cried. So I would say I'm at a good level of challenge for him. I only needed to do a couple sessions like this, and he was totally fine with me leaving the room when he was in the crate.
Good job, buddy. Good boy.
So that is crate training. The reason I selected this clip is because you actually see him get upset and calm himself down. This is the tether that I was talking about, and he did pretty well with this. You'll see that he has a little bit of mild protest of the feeling of the tether. But I'm rewarding him for any calm behavior. So if he's fussing at the leash, I would give him a treat for stopping and then sitting and then laying down. So the goal is that the dog will just chill out. This can be a useful tool for simply managing a puppy at home, so it keeps them out of trouble. If you have a puppy who really is getting into things, as well as teaches them to self-soothe, to relax themselves, and again, it's a useful technique for teaching some tolerance to mild stress.
You want to go get it?
So I just threw the treats over there. So for the purposes of the video, you'd be able to see me reward him for settling himself again. He just thinks this is really stupid.
Good boy. Good boy.
And he lays down, so he gets another little treat. So very simple. The last section that, or we got 2 more. We'll try to go through these fairly quick. We're going to talk a little bit about handling body handling and gentle restraint. This is something that we definitely want to teach as puppies. It makes them easier to manage from an owner standpoint, from the veterinary standpoint, and a grooming standpoint. So we want to teach them to accept being touched and handled all over their body, as well as handling being gently restrained. So when we work with this, you'll see a couple of different techniques. I've got a couple of short videos to show you. Sometimes we just want to give a treat and touch the puppy and practice handling all over their body so that they're getting used to it and also associate it with good things. Sometimes you'll see me actually hold until the puppy calms down and then releasing them. So we're using what's called negative reinforcement there, where the dog is actually getting rewarded by the thing that they don't really enjoy stopping. So it's not causing a lot of stress, but we are introducing a mild form of stress and then again teaching them to self-soothe and work through it, and that it's not the end of the world. Dogs that don't get this early training can be quite aggressive when you try to groom them or they go to the vet or if they get injured. So it's really important training to do with puppies. So this is puppy hold. So how I start teaching restraint. What you're going to see is I just kind of lure him in by my legs and I stand over top of him and apply a little bit of pressure onto the sides of his body with my thighs and then just grasp his chest. If he wiggles, I'm just going to ask him to calm down and then release him when he's calm and give him a treat. Oops. Sorry about that.
Oh, you did so good. Do it one more time. Good boy. Okay.
And then he gets released and he gets a treat. So this is kind of building on that. This is introducing a little bit more restraint where I'm actually going to do a full body hold and in some cases lifting. So this is a little bit more like what he might have to encounter at the vet.
Easy.
So he's struggling a little bit.
Get that treat.
I'm just going to hold him until he settles and then release him.
You ready? Good boy. What a good boy. Okay. Good boy. Good boy. Good. Good boy.
So I've just introduced lifting
Good
him a little
boy.
bit off of the
Okay.
floor.
Good job.
I'm going to kind of skip through because there's a lot of him just eating treats.
Nice job. Getting tired?
So this time I fully lifted him up,
Good.
purposefully held him until he squirmed a little bit for purposes of filming, but he did really well with this.
Good boy. You get squirmy at all?
This is so that they don't learn if I squirm or I bite or I cry, I get let go. If I'm calm, I get let go. So it teaches them to be calm when you handle them. This is, we're going to watch this one. This is actually counter conditioning him to body handling, and he doesn't like having his feet touched. So when I do this game, I call this head and shoulders, knees and toes. We're just giving a treat and touching part of the dog's body. You'll notice if he moves away, I'll stop and try again. So he does have some choice in the matter. So you'll notice when I start to handle his feet, He slows down eating the treats and kind of starts looking at it, which tells me that he's a little bit uncomfortable. But again, what we're trying to do is work the dog through a low level of discomfort. He's learning that he can cope with it. Having his feet handled is not the end of the world. And now the next time he steps in poop, when I go to wipe his feet, he's not going to have a meltdown, which actually happened. So I want to make sure I touch the belly, I touch the tail, the ears, the eyes. So you'll see a lot of that, just all stuff that they're going to have to get comfortable with as adults. But as well, we're having the puppy encounter mildly stressful experiences and basically coming through it and learning, no, you did not die. So it's all good. Again, think about it as a vaccination to stress. We're exposing them to mild stressful events. I'm just working on his feet again because that was kind of his trouble spot. I'm just feeding him a treat, and as he's eating, I'm handling his feet. Says, lady, I don't like that too much, but I guess I'll deal with it.
Oh, look at those gentle eyes.
Okay, so we're going to move on to our last section, which is talking about what you can do as a pet owner to provide enriching life experiences to your dog and puppy. So providing puppies with novel and enriching life experiences can help them to become more adaptable and view new people, animals, and situations as neutral or positive rather than scary. So when we're looking at this, you'll notice that the way that I train the puppy is very much you're not going to interact with everything. It's just part of the world. If a vehicle goes by, it's a bit of a scary noise, I'm going to feed you a treat, and I reward him quite heavily for actually looking at me. So I want him to be able to see a person and check back in with me versus thinking that he has to go say hi to every person or dog that he meets, because that can actually be a source of frustration for a dog as they age and they get older. So I want him to learn that these things exist in your environment. Don't be afraid of them, but you don't need to go say hi to everybody either. I want you a little bit more focused on me. So this is hanging out at a grocery store. So we're at a distance where people are not walking directly by us. He is extremely people social. So he's just watching people to see that they look different, they move different, and they might sound different. I love the grocery store because you have grocery carts, you have forklifts, you have every look of person that you can possibly encounter, families with children, and vehicles will drive by as well. So it's a really handy spot to sit and do some socializing. Good. So this is just a little quick video of his point of view of watching some traffic on the highway. And this is another example of just, let's hear some different sounds, let's see some different things. Loud vehicles driving by, there's a muffler shop across the street that makes a lot of noise. And we're just working on treats for noises. So if there's a loud noise, I give him a treat. And every time he looks at me, I give him a treat too. So this is just straight up exposure to these things exist in your environment. And again, we're shooting for positive to neutral association. So I don't want him scared. I also don't want him thinking he has to go say hi to every person or dog that he sees. So we're building focus onto the handler as well at the same time. I want to let him look at whatever he wants. When he chooses to look back at me, I'll give him a treat. If a loud vehicle goes by, I will also give him a treat. All right. So that is the end. I'm going to turn off screen share. I kind of went through the last bit a little quickly because we're short on time. So where is Patricia? I'm going to turn it back over to you. Thanks for listening, everybody. And then we have question time.
Yeah, so we've got, I think, several questions already in the queue, and then we can add to that.
So do you want me to look at them or you want to read them to me?
Well, I was just reading some that had popped up since I last looked at it. I think probably we might as well go up to the top. When you were talking about the early puppy stimulation, we had a couple of questions about what is mild stress or that sort of thing.
That's a good question. So you can add to this as well because you also breed wonderful dogs. So I would define, when we're looking at mild stress, we're not looking for panic. So mild stress, we're seeing a little bit of trepidation, hesitation, nervousness. You probably saw a lot more examples of this through the presentation, so hopefully it became more clear. But, you know, like a little bit of like, hey, I don't really like that, but I can deal with it, versus a full out panic attack. Slight discomfort. So you have to know how to read dog body language fairly well to do that. With dogs, you're going to see things like the puppy, when I was handling his feet, he would slow down or stop eating his treats and kind of give me a little bit of a like, hey, what are you doing? Look with his eyes. They might yawn and they might cry a little bit. So basically the level of whining in the crate video is about as much as I would want. So any kind of body language that just shows some hesitation or nervousness, but we don't want a full-blown panic attack. Patricia, do you have any better ways to define that?
So I think this was specifically with the tiny puppy stimulation.
Yeah,
So,
and maybe you might have more input on that because
yeah,
it's not
sure.
something that I've actually personally done.
Yeah, so I do it almost all the time now, have for probably 20, 30 years now. And I do think it helps. The basic set is, I don't have a puppy handy, but I don't know if people, for some reason it's really dark in here and
You're in space.
I'm in space, yeah, maybe that's it. I don't know if you can see my cell phone. If this were a puppy, and so at this point, 3 days after they're born, their eyes are still closed, their ears are still closed. They seek heat and soft things. Right, that's what they do. You can, Colin's suggesting a pop can might be more suited. I don't know. Yeah, there we go. So puppies, of course, are normally oriented like this, right? So the first thing, you turn them vertically. You just hold the puppy in your hand like this. It's an unnatural position for them. And so just being different, just this gentle stimulation. The other thing you can do with the puppy then is put it with its head down. So you have it first with the head up, then you turn it with the head down. Then a very common one, you take one of the hind feet and you just you just tickle the toes of the hind foot. Classically, they use like a feather or something, but I just use my finger. Just tickle the feet for the amount of time that you do this positioning and the tickling. They recommend about 10 seconds. With Pyrenean Shepherds, they're not subtle, and I usually use about 20 seconds per thing, and I might do them twice a day, which everybody says is too much, but I find, and I think it would be with the Great Pyres. But and then also taking a cold thing like a sack of frozen peas and putting it right on their belly. You do that. Again, it causes their system to be able to deal with stress. Now, there are other things that people do. And I mentioned in the chat that the Swedish military has done a lot of work on this. I don't have the references at the moment, but they found relatively few of the specific exercises really increased the resilience to stress as in the adult dog. There were a few that did, but they found that mothers licking the puppies is the most important aspect of this. So the more you interact with the puppy and the more you're doing crazy things to them, the more the mother then has to clean them up. And that seems to be the key to a lot of this. So just wiping yogurt on the puppy might have a similar effect, although they do think there is some element, some advantage to the actual stressing the body and the different positionings and stuff. So the puppy's not, well, the puppy can show a little stress the older they get. You want to stop this a few days before 3 weeks because that's when they really wake up to the world. So as they go on, especially with the puppy upside down, they can start to object a little bit. So yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like with a puppy, like a young puppy, when we're looking at mild stress, like I think they might cry or twitch a little bit, and that's probably about it, right?
Oh, if they don't like it, they'll go, "Arr, arr, 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 arr." Even newborn puppies, they can get pretty noisy if they don't like
Yeah.
it.
And
Usually
that's
they don't
okay,
object
right?
to
Like if they do that, we just don't want them, you know. How would you define with a neonate what's too much stress, I guess, is a good question.
Oh, I mean, if they started doing that, I think that would be too much.
Good to know.
Too much, yeah, too much squeaking. Yeah. So, but they usually, they usually don't as tiny baby puppies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so there were, okay, what's the worst age for trauma in puppies?
So that's going to vary. There is a sensitive, so when we talk about sensitive periods, that is when they are more sensitive to negative experiences. It varies between breed and bloodline, but in general, there's one around 8 or 9 weeks, and then there's one around 12 weeks, and Patricia can also add into this if I am incorrect because it's not my specialty, but we usually see one again around 7 to 9 months as well. So it's not unusual during those time periods to sort of see your puppy suddenly become more fearful or nervous, or even at 7, 9 months old and not so much a puppy anymore. But we do see that quite frequently. I mean, I would say probably the worst time for a dog to experience trauma would be that young age under 16 weeks old, because that kind of stuff can really stick with them. But anytime they're in a sensitive period, if something happens that is upsetting for them, it can really stick in their heads.
So there's a question of, oh, okay, so here's a practical question. How do you size a crate? How do you know that you're getting a crate that's the right size for your dog, for your puppy?
That's a very good question. Generally speaking, you want it to be large enough that they can stand up, turn around, and lay down comfortably. You don't want it so big that they can just poop or pee in one corner and go lie in the other one. The crate that you saw I was using in the video is too large for that puppy, but that's just the crate that, he would kind of hang out in when I was in the living room with him. The crate that he was sleeping in was about 24 inches long. So just enough that he could lay down comfortably. He could stretch out if he wanted to, but not like, nose to tail stretched out. He could curl up if he wanted to. He could stand with a little bit of space. That's generally the best size for a crate if you're house training, because the reason that crate training works is dogs have an instinct not to soil in their sleeping quarters. So they will hold their bladder as much as they can, and tell you, I need to go to the bathroom. They'll wake you up in the middle of the night so you can take them out, versus just going potty in the crate or in the pen. But you want it just enough that they can lay down comfortably, stand up, turn around, and not larger and certainly not smaller.
So the question is then they're good stress, so for dogs?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. There is actually, so there is what's called eustress, which is good stress, and distress, which is bad stress. So eustress is any kind of stress that's related to arousal and excitement. That's what we would call positive stress. It's still stress. So that could be things related to play. So some things that I will do with puppies and all dogs as well is when you get excited, you can also calm down. And it's a similar theory of when that eustress, that arousal level goes up, you can also self-soothe. So excitement going to new places is good stress, excitement getting a treat. So yes, that's a very good question, and it is very much a thing. So there's good stress and bad stress. We want them to learn to work through both. I'm also reading.
Was that somebody else or you?
No, I was just looking at the next question.
Yeah, Dorothy wants to know about specific breeds. Are there some breeds that are more prone to stress, separation anxiety, fear, thunderstorms, etc.?
I mean, I think yes. It's hard to make big sweeping generalizations about breeds, though, because there's always such a bell curve of behavior within breeds and bloodlines. But I think there are generally groups of breeds that are going to be more sensitive to certain things. I'm a herding breed person, and herding breeds tend to be more sensitive to visual stimulation. So with a herding breed, you really want to socialize them well to different looks in the environment. So different looking people, lots of moving things. They can be noise sensitive as well. I hate to point my finger at them, but the poor German Shepherd, they can be really sensitive to environment. Any dog that is sort of bred to be have a heightened awareness of their environment, herding breeds, guarding breeds, they can potentially be more sensitive to sounds and visuals. I'm trying to think if there's certain breeds that are more sensitive. There are certain bloodlines of Icelandic sheepdogs which can be prone to separation anxiety. It's definitely not the breed as a whole, but there are certain bloodlines that are more prone to it. The breed as a whole tends to have low frustration tolerance and bonds very highly to people, which that can be things that can cause separation anxiety or contribute to it. But definitely that breed, certain lines can be prone to it. Patricia, is there anything that comes to mind for you as far as certain breeds that are really prone to certain types of fear? There's definitely breeds that are going to be more prone to being stressful or nervous. Like Nikki and I have Belgian sheepdogs. They can be quite nervous, quite high stress. Anything that sticks out to you?
So toy dogs can often feel more stressed just by the things around them. They're that much bigger than they are.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, but we're about out of time, so let me ask if there's anything. Wait, well, we got a last question here. With COVID not having visitors, how can you socialize puppies? I've had a lot of trouble with that. I sent them to Nikki. We've been trading off, but it has not been what I usually do. And I know there's at least one other person on here who I suggested she come on to hear about this because she wants to have a litter soon. And the opportunities for socialization can be a lot less.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of why I had that puppy, is he came to me for some extra socializing, but you can certainly do out in the yard with precautions, sanitizing, masks, and that kind of thing. You can, again, we don't need the puppy to say hi to every single person, but you do want them to meet some people, especially if they're a breed that's going to be more prone to being nervous of people. So you can go, I think going out in your yard, if you've got a yard, is great, or meeting in a neutral area like a park. You definitely don't want to have people coming in your house. You can do a lot of exposure at home as far as people look different, sound different, move different, right? So you can wear costumes, you can wear different clothes, you can play lots of videos on YouTube of noises. You can certainly go hang out by the grocery store like I did for people watching. As far as actually introducing, I think, like you said, Patricia, you can send them off for a visit, a weekend or a night with a friend. And when you do that, you can kind of sanitize the pup when they walk in the door and when they walk out, or you can meet in a neutral area like your yard, outdoors, or a park. Any other suggestions as far as that one? One thing I did add, I'm putting this in my online puppy classes that I'm developing, is to socialize your puppy to people wearing a mask.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just be aware, I think probably everybody knows this, but you want to make sure to keep the puppy away from anybody that might be sick, because dogs are able to get a little bit sick from COVID. So they won't get terribly sick and they don't pass it to you, but they can get sick. So, all right, well, we're like way over time, so it's been so interesting. Thank you so much. And I hope to see everybody on Tuesday for smart and sensible renewable energy. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Bye.